Maurice Nicol, Psychological Commentary, Volume 2, based on his work with Gurdjieff. Birdlip, February 3, 1945. The Doctrine of Eyes. 2, Part 2 of 2. Recently, we have been talking about the doctrine of different eyes in us and how unless we cannot see, we consist of many eyes. We cannot shift from where we are. Before we go on, let us remind ourselves how different eyes arise in us and what the work teaches on this subject. The work teaches that we are born with essence alone, and in small children, we have manifestations of undeveloped essence. Essence comes down to this level of the earth in order to grow, but it cannot grow by itself beyond a very small point. Notice, by the way, that small children do not have negative emotions, which are defined by their persistence. A child grows up amongst sleeping people and begins to form personality which gradually surrounds essence. A small child never says I. When it begins to say I, imaginary I begins. Many eyes are laid down by imitation, etc. And by the growing child begins to say I to all of them. I suppose it could be said it begins to say I by a kind of imitation, by a kind of imagining itself I. And it hears adults always saying I. However, many other interesting things enter. Now we speak of ourselves as adults. We have inevitably, and even by design, acquired a wrong feeling of I, that is, imaginary I. If essence is going to grow in us further, everything connected with imaginary I must become passive. Therefore, it is understandable that the work says that unless a man can divide himself into two, he cannot shift from his psychological state. Dividing yourself into two means dividing yourself into an observing side and an observed side. Unless a man can observe himself, he cannot change. Such a person will remain always the same man, the same woman. Also, you all know that as long as a person takes himself or herself as one person, as always being the same I, he or she cannot change. Recently, there was a conversation about lying. The work has many things to say about lying. For example, the deepest thing that the work says about lying is that it destroys essence. A person who always lies destroys his or her essence. Now, essence is the only part of us that can grow and bring us to another level of being, and so to another fate, to another position in the scale of being. A liar cannot grow. Everyone has in them a great number of eyes that lie. And these eyes are always connected with the tremendous activity of self-justifying eyes. A person should be uncomfortable when he or she lies. When the work says there are two forms of lying, that is, lying to others and lying to oneself. At the same time, the work says that lying can only be defined by a relationship to some system of truth. If you have never been taught anything about what the truth is, it is difficult to see how you can lie. A small child who knows nothing does not lie and cannot lie. But when he is taught something, he may begin to lie in regard to what he has been taught. You can only lie in connection with some truth. If you have never been taught any ideas of but when he is taught something, he may begin to lie in regard to what he has been taught. You can only lie in connection with some truth. If you have never been taught any ideas of right and wrong about truth and falsity, how exactly can you lie? As soon as a man was capable of conceiving the idea of things forbidden and things allowed, he gained the capacity of lying. How can you lie in this work? And lying in the work destroys all your possibilities of development. You can both lie to other people and lie to yourself. And I would say the center of gravity of the work teaching in this regards lying to yourself as the most important thing, But the work begins by saying you must not lie to your teacher. You may not wish to speak to your teacher about something, but if you are asked to tell what happened and lie, then this is always known. Then you are in a dangerous position, not only towards the work, but towards your inner possibilities of development. Now, the system of work is quite clearly defined as a thing, and you can all know quite well what it means to lie to the work. You may lie in life, but lie to the work is quite a different thing. You're then lying in reference to a definite system of truth. You realize that any development of the psychic life is only possible through a system of truth taught to you, which you will begin to follow. You have to begin to live in this work, not merely to think of it or to talk about it. The work is a definite system of teaching of forms of truth that, if you begin to live them practically, will lead you in a certain very desirable direction. This living of the truth of the work means work on yourself. It means that you want to follow what the work teaches, but if you lie to yourself internally, as when you say you are not negative and you are, then you block the influences of the work in yourself. All development depends on the esoteric sense of relating yourself to a system of teaching which does not lie in life. The work is something extra. It is the second education. A man may be naturally good as a fellow in life, but this is not the idea of the work, because the idea of the work and of all esotericism, including the Gospels, is to bring you face to face with an entirely different way of living in life. And it is only through this entirely different way of living and of understanding that the aim of esoteric teaching on this earth is fulfilled. For example, through social training, you may not express negative emotions publicly by reason of your training, but this has nothing to do with the work. You have to get an entirely different relationship to the whole idea of negative emotions, and one that is not governed by external appearances. Internally, people who have learned not to express their negative emotions in life may be infested with negative emotions. For this reason, it is so important not to lie to oneself. On one occasion, Ouspensky said, lying destroys essence because essence can only grow through truth. A man must cease to deceive himself before he can begin to grow. The worst form of lying is pretense. Everyone pretends to be what he is not. The source of all lying in this kind lies in the imagination. On another occasion, he was talking about life in general and said, nothing in life is what it pretends to be. At that time, he was talking about the League of Nations. He said, it is not what it pretends to be, just as so many other apparent excellent organizations are not what they pretend to be. How can you expect sleeping people to create organizations far beyond their own level of being? I was very much struck by this as I thought about a sweeping statement about charitable organizations, etc., in life. On one occasion, we were passing a church with people coming out, and he said the same thing, namely to the effect that a church does not do what it pretends to do to make people Christ or like Christ. And I was reminded of what Gurdjieff once said about Christianity was that there was only one Christian called Christ. Now let us take lying at a practical level. And let us take in particular that form of lying that begins with imaginary I and becomes connected with false personality. We are told in the work parable that the human race on earth are like sheep under the charge of two farmers who are magicians and whose object is to prevent the sheep from escaping their power, and that being very mean, not wishing to use any expensive method of retraining the sheep, they hypnotized the sheep and told them they were lions and eagles and, in fact, supermen. This is a parable about the power of imagination connected with imaginary I, which eventually creates the false personality. The false personality is entirely pretense, entirely imagination, and its origin is from the imaginary I, that is, the imagination that we have real I in us. With this form of imagination, which keeps us as sheep asleep, we gain the most extraordinary ideas about ourselves. We can think that we can do, for example, we think that we have real will. We think we can decide our own lives, and we can never see that everything happens, even our own lives. We form in ourselves a kind of secret imagination, and although it itself does not correspond to this secret imagination, we still cling to it. We feel we are lions, eagles, supermen, etc., and never realize what we actually are like.